Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne Leong, and I'm really pleased to be sharing with you today the latest results from our Attention Economy project here at Dentsu. So we're about 3 years into this journey now. And personally, for me, it's been really fulfilling to see this evolve from thinking and an agency desire to tackle an industry challenge to where we are today, which is having come so far in garnering the insights and data to make this truly tangible and actionable. In the beginning, it almost felt like this momentous undertaking, but thanks to some forward thinking media partners, research partners, and clients, we're starting to see real momentum in the space. And just shifting back to why we even started the project in the first place, we launched Attention Economy because at present, the average person is exposed to 5,000 commercial messages in a single day. So if you think about the abundance of those impressions and the fact that attention in and of itself is a limited and scarce resource, there's no way that they all can have an equal impact. Yet the current metrics that we're using were designed at a time when those ad exposures were much, much lower. And so it's safe to say that the industry hasn't necessarily kept pace with the explosion of all of these different formats. So what we wanted to do was charge ourselves with finding a better way to look at these impressions fairly and a better understanding of the attention that you're likely to get from all of them. Now, the question around attention isn't necessarily a new one. In fact, it's probably been one of the longest held questions in advertising over time. But the main difference now is that we actually have the eye tracking tech to be able to accurately measure it, value it, and apply it. So as mentioned previously, we're on year 3 of this multi-year research program and have made a huge commitment and significant investment into tackling this challenge. So we completed our first wave of research in 2019. And the purpose of that was more to prove the value of attention. So mainly, is it something that's worthy to pursue from a media standpoint? And turns out, yes, it is, which intuitively makes sense, right? The more an ad is seen, the better of a chance it has of working. But now we actually have the data to prove it. The first wave was also intended to provide that foundation for the much more granular work that was to follow in wave 2. The second wave of work, which I'm going to share a couple of highlights from, was done in partnership with Lumen and TVision in the US and Lumen in the UK. And the goal of that was to build a scaled database of attention norms that allow us to extract insights at a granular level and to help inform new capabilities and solutions that we'll be creating for our clients. So in the second wave, what we really wanted to understand were 2 things. So first, what do natural attention behaviors look like? What are their drivers? What levels of attention on average can you expect from a variety of platforms and video and display formats? The second was the brand impact of that attention. We wanted to know essentially the effectiveness of it across formats and its relationship to both choice and recall. So as mentioned previously, this study was done in both the US and UK and was measured through Lumen's panel and eye tracking tech. In the US specifically, we also worked with TVision as well to measure eye tracking on TV, as they have a panel of around 5,000 households where they passively measure both whether someone was present in the living room and if their eyes were on ads while watching TV. So overall, we're collecting a huge amount of attention behaviors at a very granular level. And we have done this across 2 modules. We have a structured one where we control the ads in the environments they're being served so that we can gain insights on certain features of the ad and how it relates to choice and recall. And in the second module is just collecting eye tracking data at scale continuously to get to those natural in the wild attention behaviors. So the insights I'm going to share really ladder up to a main headline, if you will. And it's that attention is 100% human metric that is better than our current value system. So a lot of times, and over time as well, we see that viewability has sort of become this proxy for attention. But I'm going to showcase why it's somewhat of an arbitrary measure and that we need to evolve beyond that to attention, which is a metric that's more strongly linked to outcomes. So again, this is one of the biggest learnings that we've seen from our research. And what this chart shows is that just because an ad is technically considered viewable does not necessarily guarantee that it will actually be viewed. We see a lot of cases where ads that meet the MRC standards fail to get seen. But interestingly enough, we also see the opposite. There are a lot of ads that aren't technically viewable, but actually get noticed. And this is a pattern that tends to happen more in a certain format, such as in mobile. So what this highlights is that viewability, again, isn't necessarily the proxy for attention that many deem it to be. I think the standard was necessary at the time that it was established because we needed something in an advertising environment that was a bit like the Wild West at the time, and to have a way to reduce wastage on ads. But certainly today, we do not think it is enough. The other fundamental insight that we're also seeing is that there is a pretty strong connection between how long an ad is viewed, so an ad's dwell time, and choice uplift for a brand. So what's really interesting to note is that you don't necessarily need a significant amount of impact, of attention to drive impact. Because this relationship follows a curve, you can get pretty good uplifts even at those low levels of attention, sometimes even under a second. So what this reflects is that there's value all along the curve. And maybe we should be thinking about standards to reflect that. How do we think about standards that maybe are more of a sliding scale rather than a fixed threshold? We also looked at the relationship between viewability and recall, as well as viewability and choice. So viewable ads that aren't seen have some lift in recall, but a very small impact on choice. And even if ads are not viewable, if they are noticed, they do just as well as viewable ads, despite the fact that they're low time in view. Again, this just reinforces the insight that you need that real human viewing to drive strong impact, especially when it comes to choice. So this is why we feel so strongly that we must plan and buy using attention. It is the only metric indicative of the human experience of media, and we feel it brings us that much closer to an effective exposure. So if we feel really strongly about this, how do we actually start to do that? How do we take this data and actually turn it into a tangible value system? So the way that we can start to do this is to build a funnel and run our impressions through a few criteria with data derived from our research. So just starting from the top, first we want to look at what percent of those impressions could be seen. So this is more of a function of the delivery of that impression. And then from there, what was in fact seen at all? What percent of our impressions had some level of eye gaze? And then going down the funnel, we then look at how long on average was it seen for? So what is the dwell time? And from there, we can come up with a number that essentially combines that power to grab your attention with the power to hold your attention. So this would be your attentive second per 1,000 impressions. So we can start to look at the average attentive seconds per 1,000 impressions across multiple formats and compare them. Now, this does not necessarily mean the higher the number, the better. There's a lot more nuance to this that we've seen in our research. And we can also start to marry this with the data that we have on choice and recall from the previous section, as well as the costs, to start to understand both the value and effectiveness of each of these attentive seconds. And when it comes to attentive seconds, we see that it is really the product of two quite different types of drivers. So the first is media. So things like the size, the location, the context of the ad, whether it was a forced view or a non-forced view, the type of device. And then there's also the meaning, the nature of the creative, and how it's received by your desired target audience. So, our in the wild data from this research allows us to quantify the relative importance of all of the media drivers. And we have a ton of in depth data across each of these factors that I don't necessarily go into this presentation. But again, we have all of that data to show how each of these contribute to attentive seconds. We also have anticipated in-market effects of attention on outcomes. So as mentioned previously, we can start to incorporate that as well into our metrics across all of the formats so that we're not only looking at attention, but also the value of that attention. So, taking this approach, we've been exploring different ways to deliver better and more effective solutions for our clients. So we've been doing this for some time now in parallel with our research. So as our research evolves, this evolves as well. And it's something that we're absolutely committed to developing out further. So for us, we know that the second wave of research has given us pretty much an unparalleled database that will allow us to develop capabilities and solutions for our clients. So we're taking this data and integrating it across our planning process and agency tools, which we think is really just the baseline and a starting point. We also recognize that this approach needs to be adapted to account for nuances across brands. And so we work with our clients to develop custom strategies and research that take into account not only their media and their creative, but their unique business and category dynamics as well. And then on the activation side, we're working with several media owners who are partnering with us to be able to transact on these strategies. And we've started to test them with a few of our clients who are very innovative and future leading as well. So, an example of one of those products is our attention algorithm. So, this solution received quite a bit of positive press when it launched in the UK. And again, it is an example of one of the capabilities that we're developing. So, what it does is it targets high attention inventory in real time using Lumen's attention prediction modeling, which considers things like the device, the placement, the time of day, size on screen, etc., and then translates that into a programmatic script and activates it via a custom algorithm within the DSP. So one of our clients, CoOp, launched this with us, and they were really excited to do so because they had a campaign that had slightly more complex messaging around recycling. So what we did was, as part of this campaign, we appended a brand uplift study to see whether the attention strategy really did deliver better impact than the standard buy. And I should also mention that the standard buy still ran on premium inventory via PMP and not on the open market. So we were really, really excited that the campaign still generated almost a third greater recall than our standard buy. It drove a 21% greater perception of quality and improved consideration by 11%. ABI is also another client that has been an early adopter of the product, using it for both video and display. Because of our attention economy research, we learned that not all impressions delivered via standard buy is necessarily seen. So what ABI wanted to do was to cut out any wasteful investments, and they set themselves a waste reduction goal of 9% over the course of 2 years. So they did see that driving better attention leads to greater efficiencies and delivers strong campaign performance. Their use of the attention algorithm across both display and video delivered such positive results across key metrics that they've developed a roadmap to further test and learn in this space. They also have some work in play with us right now here in the US as well, in both the digital and the television space. For TV in particular, they're using the T-Vision eye tracking data and worked with us to have chosen networks on their buy guarantee against attention metrics. So it's really groundbreaking because they are a pioneer in using attention as a currency in the TV marketplace. So overall, there's a ton more around this, but I've shared really the main interesting bits from our research. And if there's anything that I really want you to take away, it's the following. Again, as I've mentioned throughout this presentation, attention matters. Just because an ad is viewable doesn't necessarily mean it's viewed. And therefore, you really need that human attention to get us to a comparable view of a real exposure. But even more crucially, the effect of that exposure matters almost as much. We cannot leave out the relative power of a second's worth of attention to drive an outcome. We've seen in our research that 5 seconds worth of attention in one set of circumstances may be different and have a different type of impact than 5 seconds worth of attention in a different set of circumstances. So again, it's important to take into account those nuances when developing a value system. And then at Dentsu, we are continuing to expand our research in this space across channels, across markets, and in new areas such as creative as well. Again, it's a huge commitment for us. So we will only continue to work on building more data, more solutions to plan and activate in this space. Thanks again for listening, and hopefully you found that interesting and useful. Thank you.